All right, what's up, everybody? This is asap.engineering podcast. This is our first one, so bear with us as we figure out how to do this. But yeah, so basically, me and Cameron had the idea of building out this podcast as a way for people who are in tech, who are developers, software engineers, and who are wanting to get a little bit more into like entrepreneurship and even like solopreneurship or partnerpreneurship realm. And so, yeah, we just kind of wanted to go over like some of the things we're learning as we go through and we are building products and trying to ship. And then, yeah, just so as like an introduction to me, and then I'll let Cameron go. But my name is Bridger Tower. I do a lot of I'm by trade a designer, and then I've gone into doing a lot of development and doing a lot of like the design engineering and building out user interfaces for products and websites that we do a lot of. And yeah, so Cameron, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm Cameron Youngblood. I guess by trade, full stack software engineer. Um, Bridger and I met in college, and we both come from like a marketing, advertising, kind of communications type background. And so we're pretty passionate about that side of product development, which is really fun. Um, yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so today's episode, we wanted to talk about getting into open source software and figuring out what to build and then how to ship what you built for the open source community. And so a while back, me and Cameron have done a lot of work for a company called Ampri. And Ampri deals a lot with like lead generation, and basically what that means is we're running a lot of paid media, and that turns into leads for the companies that we work with. And so we were kind of pitched this idea of possibly building out what's called like a lead router. And a lead router is basically a central place where you can send a lead from a form, and then you can have it go different places and keep track of things. And that's a very dumbed down version of everything a lead router does in the industry. But we found like that as we were building a lot of projects on the side, and just all the websites and things that we have and do at 98, we were wanting a simple solution as like a very minimal lead router. And so we came up with this idea for what we called Router.so, and that's also the domain if you want to check it out. But Cameron, do you want to go over like maybe like the problem we were trying to solve with Router and why we wanted to do it?
Yeah. So, kind of as Bridger talked about, it stemmed from this idea of building a lead router, which is like pretty complex software because it essentially, I like to think of it as like this kind of like middleware as a service that people submit forms across all these different landing pages, and then it comes to one central location, and then you can manage a lot of like the sales side of it too, right? Of like selling leads, so you can manage contracts and then how much these partners are buying, how many of these leads they're buying, and how much they're paying for them. So then, as we're working on kind of projects related to that, and this role that we're in, basically we realized that there was a market for a lot simpler thing, right? Like we're building out all these pages, and maybe we didn't need to sell the leads right away, but we wanted to like capture them and just hold them somewhere and then be like notified when we got leads. And so we started looking around for different options, and there were like a few kind of small options, but we didn't really like any of them. And we're like, it would just be cool, right? If we had like, we have, a dozen websites where we're just building and putting it out there and just kind of testing the market. And we don't really have one central location where we can collect all these like contact forms, like signups and everything in one spot. So we're like, we should just build that. But then there's web form builders like Typeform. Tally is also a super good one. Like we used Tally for a while. Tally's a great product.
Mm-hmm.
But we just got annoyed because we couldn't control the UI. like that's really important to us. And so
Yep.
we're like, let's just build something that's basically like a headless solution, right? Where it's like, it just spins up basically an API endpoint that we can post to, and then we can create a schema and then just use that to ingest the leads and then have them all in one place. So that was kind of the background.
Yeah,
So
and
it's cool that we could like, the idea was to kind of build something that we could just like dog food in all of our projects to use.
yeah, totally. And I think that that's like a good principle is like, you go about your day as a developer and you're constantly running into problems you have to solve. And so, occasionally, like for me at least, and Cameron can probably test, but it's like there's these things that will come up frequently. And like for us, forms, we're always building forms, and it's always, not as easy as we'd like to just hook up a form and collect a lead. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of like where the idea came from. And then to go off of like what Karen was saying, like Tally is a great product, and there's a few more that are also great, but we also like don't love the idea of the embedding forms because, in the lead gen industry and just in, like SaaS software selling, it is very important how it looks, and then it's also very important how fast it is. And if you can, load the form like on the server, then it's going to be way faster, and that helps conversion rate. And so,
Yeah.
that's kind of like, I guess like these are kind of like the problems that we had and why we wanted to like, why we saw it fit to like, okay, let's build something. And so maybe now we can talk more about like just quickly like the dev process and like the tech stack and things. So I can explain like the front end. We used Next.js for with TypeScript, and then for styling we use Shadcn and Tailwind. And so yeah, we just set it up using the app router as well, and just trying to take advantage fully of the speed that Next.js and Vercel offer to us. And then the front end it's like a lot of right. It's a lot of data you have to display, and so we used like the tan stack table with Shadcn, and that was really helpful because we were able to really show a lot of data in an easy way. And
Yeah.
then just for the layout, like we built out like, and we also use Shadcn, and then like a bit of a custom framework. And then another piece that we used is what's called Craft, which is something we made that basically like auto styles text and like gives you a design system. Um, and so that was also kind of like the front end piece of it. And then maybe Cameron, you explain more like how the back end works and how that all fits together and what tech is in there.
Yeah. Yeah. We, for the backend, it's using Next.js too, which is super nice. It's just using server actions, React server components. And it made it really easy. It's, I feel like, a pretty simple code base, which is pretty cool for what it does.
Yeah,
We're
totally.
also using NextSafe action, which is like a super cool library for just type safe, end-to-end type safety, like on the front end and back end.
Sick.
And it's just nice because you don't have to spin up. Yeah, I mean that's the beauty of server actions. You don't have to spin up an API route for everything that you're doing for every CRUD action. And then the only like API route handler that we have set up with Next.js is the one that is used to like post the leads and to like ingest the leads and stuff. But it's pretty simple. Like the way that it's all set up in the back end is it's we have like an endpoint that basically we say spun up, but it's just like a dynamic route that people can post to based off of their specific endpoint ID. And then there's a schema that's created. So a user can create a schema, and we're using Zod on the front end and the back end for that. So they basically create a schema and we create a Zod schema that we use on the server to validate the data coming in. And then we can give like very specific errors on if the data is validated or not and like what's wrong with it. And we're like saving all those errors too. And then like we also give when the form gets generated like we do like a little bit of very simple code generation to give the user some simple React code that they can paste into their project that uses like ShadCN UI forms, Zod for validation, and React hook form to manage the form. Or you can just use like a plain HTML form element too. Like it's pretty agnostic to what you're going to use on the front end. But
Yeah.
but yeah, and we mainly did that just because like we know the stack so well. We're firm believers in just using what you know, right? Like the best analogy I've ever heard about stacks is it's like a hammer. Like in the software community, people like argue over what framework to use like all the time.
Yeah, totally.
But it's like a hammer. Like are like roofers gonna argue like what hammer they're using to hammer in nails? Like maybe,
Yeah.
but in the end of the day, like if the roof gets put on, then like no one cares. Like the user's not gonna care. And so we just stuck with what we knew.
Yeah.
But yeah, and
Yeah.
it was. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, going off of that, maybe a small tangent, but it is like I feel like that is a mindset shift that you have to go through when you're becoming like a technical entrepreneur or
Totally.
solopreneur. It is like in the world of development, right? It's like we all have what we love and what we think is best. And then, but in reality, when we're building these products for end users, they don't care. And right. And so what really matters is like the user experience, and then really just like trying to get into the mind of these people, and even like testing it with as many people as possible to see like, yeah, like what are the issues they're facing, and like, yeah, maybe there's tech that can help to solve that, but in reality, most like if you're good at a certain type of software, then just stick with it because it can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like whatever saves you the most time, just build it. That was what was so
Totally.
cool about using the stack that we know so well is we literally built the MVP in like 4 hours
Yeah.
with like the help of AI too. Like it was really before Cursor blew up, so we were just pasting stuff into ChatGPT
Yeah.
before Claude 3.5 Sonnet came out, but and it helped to do stuff fast.
Yeah, totally.
And yeah, we built it super fast, and then it took a while to like make changes, refactor to the point where we were comfortable enough like open sourcing it. But we just
Yeah.
built it super fast, and we were able to use it internally for I don't know, like we didn't really it wasn't active development for this long, but we used it for probably 4 months before we refactored and released it,
Yeah,
and
totally.
collected
Yeah, I think
probably
something
close to
cool.
500 to 600 leads with it, which was
Yeah,
sick.
which is crazy. Yeah. I think something cool you brought up too is like the concept of dog fooding. Could you explain more like about that and what that looked like for Router?
Yeah. I know I gotta maybe we like look up the official definition for it, but
Mm-hmm.
I know it's something that we hadn't really heard about. We didn't put a name to it until just a few months ago, but it's the idea of basically like using your product while building it. And so yeah, it was actually really cool. So like when we built it and then put it on Twitter, Guillermo from Vercel, CEO of Vercel, actually DM'd us and was like saying like, "Oh, this is a super cool project," and we had like tagged him in the post, and it was like a super big honor, right, to like hear from
Yeah.
Guillermo because we like
So sick.
very
Yeah.
look up to all the things he's done, and like we love Vercel. Vercel's awesome. Next.js, like yeah, even like Socket.io, like all the things that he's done, like very very impressive. But that was one of his first questions was like, "Are you dog fooding it? Like, where are you dog fooding it?" Which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like
Yeah, it's
basically
like,
the idea of using it like while you're building it. And I know that
yeah.
like Vercel dog foods Vercel, right? Like they use Vercel to build Vercel. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and there's like a lot of other examples of dog fooding, but that's like how we did it. Was we basically just were using it to collect leads, and like Router dog foods Router. Like if you go to the Router.so landing page and want to like increase your limits, then it uses Router to collect the
Yeah.
leads. So that's a good
Exactly.
example too, I guess.
Yeah, it's a great example. Yeah, and I really do think dog fooding is important, and like I don't know, it's pretty easy to like have an idea, start building something in secret, and spend all this time trying to make it perfect and then launching it. Whereas we've seen like, yeah, that we've done that before, right? And so it's like that's tough too because you're just betting everything on like maybe this is validated, maybe this is a validated idea versus like, okay, I'm using it in my daily work life, and then I'm also having some of my buddies or whoever using it also to test it out, and help to build it and stuff. So and then that's like a good form of validation, and you can see like, oh, where's the value, where are the issues, where are people really wanting out of this tool, and it just helps you kind of like stay iterative and just develop a good product.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's so important too to like be passionate about this something that you're building because I mean, you and I have found that like stuff that we've worked on, we've just lost steam because we're just not passionate about it. Like maybe
Yeah,
maybe there really is a need in the market for it, but we're just like, I don't know, we just lose interest
yeah,
because like this
totally.
is boring to build. So
Yeah,
I feel like if you can solve for your own problems first before other people's problems, like you just stay so motivated, especially as like an indie developer or just building open source projects or side projects. Like it's so much easier to stay motivated because you're working towards finding a solution for your problem and it's like perfectly tailored to your problem. And like odds are that other people are facing the exact same thing. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So
totally.
yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I think too, like something that's interesting about Router is that it is open source. And, like I feel like we can maybe talk about why we went that path and why we chose to do like an open source license versus just doing a, like commercial and trying to get people to hop on and use it. And so, yeah, like I think in the beginning, like it had started out as just like an internal tool, and that's why we built it, is like, okay, we have this problem and we want to make a solution, and then we'll just use the solution. And then from there, it did become like a pretty solid like use case, and we started hearing more people who are having like similar issues with like, I want to be able to have like a form backend and have headless forms, and like in a cheap, easy way for all my side projects. And then so from there, we kind of made the decision like, okay, let's like open source this thing. And I think what's been really cool is, we've made a lot of like open source. I would say this is our first like open source software, but we've made like quite a few like open source tools and repositories for people to use. But what's been cool about like this is by open sourcing a piece of software, you already have a you're a step ahead of competition because you have that element that you are open source. And I've seen that is like is a good example to me, is like Stephen Tay who built
Yeah.
dub.sh, where it's like dub is not a new idea. There's hundreds of like simple links, short link builders that you can use. Bitly is the first one I think that came out, but then there's been a ton more, and even like Google made one. But what Steven did so well is he used that open source advantage, I would say, to his benefit, and it's really taken off. And
Totally. Cal.com too, I feel like is
yeah,
huge.
Cal.com.
And yeah, both of those were like huge inspirations for us. And Cal.com too, like they're very profitable. It's really cool to see.
Hmm.
At least from my understanding, they're profitable. It's cool to see that they've done so well. And it's just, yeah, it's like an open source Calendly. Like Calendly is what everyone knows and uses, but
Totally.
there's such a market for, well, that's another tangent for software that doesn't suck because I'm not like a huge fan of Calendly, but
Yes.
then
Yeah.
Cal.com's like way better. But then also
Yeah.
just open source, like you can go in and see it.
Yeah.
I feel
Totally.
like we both too like very much believe in the vision of open source. Like
Hmm.
it's maybe it's kind of like uh, a dreamer view of the world, but I really think it's cool that when people open source things because there's so much value that you're providing to society, right? Like in pushing forward. I mean, it's like we've relied on open source to build Router. Like there's so many things that we would have had to do from scratch if we hadn't used open source projects. And so
Yeah.
it
Totally.
just basically this uh, building something that's modular so that other people can use it just like advances what people can build and what people can do, which is super cool. Just kind of contributing to the collective knowledge out there. I feel like it's a
Yeah.
very positive thing for the world.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think too, like open source isn't for every tool, right? You know, I think why Router also fits into this like cal.com, dub.sh, all these is because it is a tool that touches developers who really
Yeah.
understand like what open source is. And so, I wouldn't say like everything you build should be open source. It's like, sometimes it's not necessary, But when your target audience maybe touches like the dev community or even the tech community at large, like most people understand what open source is at that point, and so it could be a leg up for you in shipping a new product to be able to get some more attention up front.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah, you tap into a whole ecosystem too that of basically like free media, free earned media, which is like not, the only reason why we decided to go open source, but honestly was a big part of it because it's people are passionate about open source and it's a positive thing, right? So people get excited to like look at a code base and contribute to it. We've already had people like contribute to it.
yeah,
Um, and that's what's been super cool. And yeah, like just kind of tapping into the open source community, there's people that are passionate about it and that help promote it and get it out there more. And
yeah,
like if we can make money from it, great. If not, like it's like okay, whatever. Like we've pushed forward a good product that is hopefully helping people, and that they can like self-host or even if they use like the free hosted version, right? Like it's
yeah,
hopefully it's providing value to people.
yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that's maybe something that has been, well, basically like currently we're still launching. Like I feel like,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
we
that'd be
launched
interesting to
it.
talk about too, like the launch phases that we've kind of gone
Yes.
through.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we kind of like, I don't know if like in the industry there's like terms like soft launch and then like like okay, here's my idea, I'm gonna launch this. Like, so we didn't do any like super soft launch where it was like, oh, like we're thinking about doing this. Here's a landing page, like sign up if you want. And I think the reason we didn't is one, we needed the product, so we weren't just building something without the intent of using it. And then two is we don't have like a huge following on Twitter or like anywhere else. And so we don't really have the community to easily be like, here's an idea. Like, if you
Yeah,
want, sign up and we can get 1,000 signups or whatever. And so what we did is we built out the tool where it was at the point where like anybody could sign up and then you could try it out and use it. And so we did that, and then we just went to Twitter, right, as our main launch pad. And then Cameron you kind of did like the tweet that went pretty viral. What type of things did you do that got it to like really get kicked off?
I think a big part of it was something that you did was you like tagged people. Um, and let me see if I can find it. Here we go. Um, you went in and in the mentions you like tagged people in the replies you tagged people that you thought would be interested in it, which was really cool. But we kind of leveraged the networks of other people, which is cool. Like whenever you use a product, like for instance we're using Resend for like transactional emails. Like Resend, of course, is going to be excited about that, right? Because it like pushes forward their product, and so you can just kind of tap into that audience. And I think that's what helped, like tagging like Shad CN, Drizzle. I don't know, is it Eduardo, the guy that made
Yeah,
Next Safe Action, like tagging him. Like he doesn't
yeah,
have
yeah,
like a massive following, but just him like tweeting about it too and liking it. Um, but we kind of just pushed it and tagged a ton of like the things that we're using, and it took off. I think to sum it up, we just basically tagged people's projects that we built off of. So
yeah,
like Next Safe Action, Shadcian, Drizzle, Recent, Vercel, Next.js.
yeah,
Um, and then people just get excited about it. And then we also I posted like a link to the GitHub repository, which that didn't get like a ton of impressions, but basically saying like, hey, like give some stars here, give some love. And people are pretty like, I mean, it doesn't cost anything, right, to start something on GitHub, but it helps so much, which is cool. People are really good about just going in and like liking it. But yeah, I think that's like what kind of helped push it, is just like tagging people. But it's not just like a spam approach, right? Like
yeah,
we've also been pretty involved on Twitter, even though we don't have massive followings, and like interacting with people from Next.js, Vercel, Recent, Shadcian, Drizzle, even like next safe action on Twitter in the past, so that people kind of recognize you when you do post something. I think that's
Yeah.
one big thing that people don't realize is like people ask like, oh, like how do you build stuff and have it be noticed? I think it's just being like actively involved. Like you can't just like post something and then get mad if no one retweets it, because it's like
Yeah.
that's not how the world works. You have to like be part of the community.
Yeah. And yeah,
Yeah.
I totally agree. And I do think like too, it's that what you said is key, where it is like a lot of these people have spent a lot of time to build these open source projects, and if you're willing to give them some credit and like talk about why you loved using whatever their piece of tech was, then like they're going to be open to hearing about that, and you might even get some retweets or like comments or anything, which just helps it to like grow organically on its own, and that type of thing. And then yeah, so since that Twitter launch, like you did, I think it got like what, like 40,000 impressions, maybe more on
Yeah.
Twitter.
Yeah. It's pretty good. A lot of people bookmarked it. I think I had
Yeah,
almost
sweet.
400 bookmarks or something. Um,
Yeah, sick. Yeah, so
Pretty
then from
good. Yeah.
there, it's
Lots of
like,
traffic to the landing page, like almost
yes,
2,000 unique visitors
which
to
is
our
crazy.
Router.so landing page. Yeah, which is super cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and then from there, we reached out to Vercel. They've been pushing a lot more like their template section of their website, where you can find templates for, you know, a bunch of different Next.js projects and also all different types of software. But so we got on there as well as our own, like a router software on the Vercel templates. And
Yeah,
that
like a
has,
form building type
yeah, exactly.
thing.
Yeah, and that's helped a lot. And then we also got on Open Alternative, which is openalternative.com, which is
Or
it's basically
.co, I
like
think, maybe.
.co is Otis. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so that's basically, it just shows you a bunch of alternatives to popular software that are open source. And so we um, just hit up the guy, um, and he put us on there, which was awesome. And then from there, it's just, I feel like too, like it's important not to just hit launch and send your tweet on the first day, but continuing to like, as you launch a YouTube video about it, like quote your tweet and like, or retweet it. And then
Yeah,
as you know, get featured on whatever, like make sure to mention that and keep the conversation going.
totally. Yeah, I totally agree. It's good to keep it kind of rolling. I also think it's important just to like not be afraid to ask, right? Like if you're proud of what you've built and it's good, like have confidence in it, and then don't be afraid to like reach out to people to check it out. And then like don't be afraid to implement feedback.
Yeah.
We've already changed stuff that people have basically put feedback on, right? Or
Yeah.
like opened issues for, or just given feedback on Twitter. And a lot of them are really good. And like not everything's really good advice, and you don't have to follow everything, but be willing to adapt. But I think that just reaching out to people, it's kind of crazy how far you'll go, and just not being afraid, like hitting people
Yeah.
up, like, hey, can you check this out? Worst they can say is just no, or just ignore you. You know, that's, you don't lose anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is like, I think what's nice too about Router, or like this concept of building something that you'll use, is then too, it kind of helps to like eliminate some of like that fear of like, oh, nobody's gonna care about this, or like I won't get any users, because we've built something valuable that we're using. And
Yeah,
so, you know, that's what I enjoy about doing this path, is it is, we now have something that we can use all the time, and it's been a huge benefit already to us at 98, right? So I
yeah,
think that
totally,
that's a good thing to think about when you're building out something new.
definitely.
Yeah, so I wonder too, like what type of, I mean, we've talked about it throughout, we've been talking, but what type of like lessons did you learn from this? And I think too, we can talk maybe a little bit about like what it's like to maintain open source software now that we've had like some of
Yeah,
those things happen.
yeah. I think this is less on Router, but on another open source project that we've built that has like gotten a pretty decent following and decent usage. I think something I didn't realize was like how many people will go on and just like do feature requests and stuff, right? Like there's a lot of
Yeah.
entitlement in open source, which is kind of
Yeah.
a bummer. Um, DHH actually talks about this, and like Rails is huge, right? So like we don't really have a ton of uh, like our projects don't really compare to Rails in size, but Rails is like huge, and so many people use it, and so many companies have used it in the past, and still are using it. But he kind of talks about this idea where it's like not open source is like not really a democracy. It's more of like a dictatorship, and you kind of like have to make it that
Yeah.
way because people will just like it'll just become crazy if you don't. And I feel like that's something that I've kind of seen is people will just go in and like feature request or say like, oh, you need to change this, and then they just like are not willing to participate in the actual like building of the software. And
Yeah.
so I feel like at first I was like, oh, let's just like merge everything that people do because it's cool to have people contribute to the project. But then you start to realize like that becomes a mess and it becomes hard to maintain.
Yeah.
So I feel
Totally.
like that's a big thing that I've learned is just you have to like have a solid vision of where you want it to go. And it's like totally okay to be like passionate about that and to say like, no, you can say no to stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like I opened a pull request last week on a project that's in Go, and it's like a
Yeah.
on the like yeah, it's like a Docker configuration for running like Go projects like Pocket Base, and I like changed a few things, and I was like, oh, like here's some like things that I would change or like things that I've done to make it easier for me to run this locally, and the guy like closed it. He's like, oh, like I appreciate it, but like I'll just do this on my own, or I don't really agree with this, and it's like totally fine. Like that's
Yeah.
like we do that to people, and it's that I'm like totally okay with that. So it's just like important to have a vision and
Yeah.
not say yes to everything.
Yeah.
That's from
Totally.
like the open source side, at least.
Yeah. Totally. And I think like you're right. What you said, it is like this is your code base. Like there's a reason that pull requests go to you. And so
Yeah,
you don't have like you are in charge of what you find valuable enough to like push through and use. And I think like too, I've been pleasantly surprised with like the like that type of support we've gotten on Router. And it's been like, I don't know, cool to see like, oh, I didn't even think of this, or oh, I missed this bug, and somebody catches it and is able to help and help to build it. And so another cool thing about going open source, like
totally.
where else does that happen? It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's so cool to see people that are much smarter than us work on something that we created,
Yes.
which
Yeah,
I think is
totally.
just super, super cool.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think like for me, the biggest lesson I learned from this experience of like shipping a software open source is like I was surprised. Like, I don't know, for me, I feel like how you can ship pretty soon. Like that's what I guess is my like takeaway is that it doesn't have to be perfect and it doesn't have to be like have all the bells and whistles that maybe you have ideas about, right? Like me and Cameron, we
Yeah,
have a lot of like future plans for a router and a lot of things that we can build into it. But we made kind of the decision like well, it's at the point, right? Like, can you get a user to sign up and then can they use it? Like that's kind of what you need to really kick it off. And then I don't know, for me I've seen like now I feel like a lot more confident in where to take router because we do have users and we're seeing like what these people are using the software for.
yeah,
Yeah, so that's one like I feel like that's my biggest takeaway I think so far from shipping it and like what it's like to have an open source software.
yeah. No, that's such a good point because I feel like there were so many things that we wanted to build into it initially, and we kept telling ourselves like, at this point it'll be good, it'll be okay to ship, or at this point it'll be okay to ship, and then you just keep pushing it back,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
we just had to stop and be like, it works. If it works and is fine to launch, then we can launch it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, and
totally.
it's just an MVP. So just ship it and figure out if it's good enough or not. If no one signs up, then maybe it's not good enough, and then you can change stuff from there. But
Yeah,
you don't know until you
exactly.
ship it.
Yeah. Yeah, I got asked a couple of weeks ago, like how do we get users, right? And I think that that's like always on top of all these entrepreneurs' minds is like how do you get users? And my answer then is like try to use open source. And why I think that is like again, like what I said, it's like open source gives you like this it's like a label basically that you can just throw on your application and it a lot of people are more willing to like tweet about it, to repost it, to add it to their repo, like that type of thing. And so
Yeah,
I've been impressed, like just like open sourcing is a way to get users, especially
Totally.
like if they're in that like niche market of like tech people,
Yeah. And I feel like people are so forgiving with open source.
Yeah.
Like, well, I just went off about how it's annoying when people just like open a pull request, or not necessarily a pull request, but open an issue, right? And they'll be like, you need to do this. But at
Yeah.
the same time, I feel like people are pretty forgiving where it's like, oh, it's open source, right? It's not perfect. So it's like you can
Yes.
use it, but then like there's like this liability that we like give the user, especially as a developer, like a dev tool.
Yeah.
It's like you give a liability to the user when it's open source, because you're like, okay, like if you want to be better, then like you need to contribute, which I think
Yes.
is like kind of like a power move a little bit. That's not like
Yeah.
why we did it, but it's like it is kind of nice because it's like if you want something to change for the better, then like you should try to contribute to it, or you should be like actively involved with it. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of developers have felt frustrations with software where they can't do anything about it, but that's what's so cool about open source is if you don't like something about something, then you can either contribute to the application or you can just hit the fork button on GitHub and then make
Yes.
your own version.
Yeah.
And
for
it's
sure.
like most of the work's done for you. You just have to tweak a few things. So that's what's
Yes.
really cool about it. But
Yeah,
yeah, I
totally.
totally agree.
Yeah, I think too, like moving on from the open source is like something I think we'll talk about a lot on this podcast going forward too, is like building a community and
Yeah.
even just like shipping like this open source software. Like we both have gotten probably 50 plus new Twitter followers. We've gotten a bunch more subscribers on YouTube, like that type of thing. And like it is this trickle down effect where it's like if you have like that greater mindset that's like, okay, I'm not just trying to ship this one product and then hopefully it scales and I'm a millionaire, but it's like I'm trying to build this whole community and this system around where I'm able to like build products for a living and I'm able to launch them and I have different sources of income that I can kind of like pool into one.
Yeah.
And this really I've seen like the two open source projects we've done that have done the best, like I feel like I've most of my audience has come from that, which has been really cool to see. And it's like almost like it's like a side product of shipping like an open source repo, but it's like major and huge, and then it makes it easier to ship another open source project. So that's what's been
Totally.
cool.
Yeah. Or a closed source, SaaS. You know what I
Yes,
mean? Like it just
exactly.
makes it
Yeah.
easier once you have impressions and can build an audience.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I think this has been like a great overview of like how to build and ship an open source piece of software. Cameron, for you, like if somebody came to you, a buddy that was like, I want to ship this, I have this idea, I'm gonna ship it. Like what would you recommend to me? What would be your like just brief like here's what I would say and here's what you should do.
Yeah. I think the playbook is start tweeting about it. Make sure that you're passionate about the problem you're solving. I would say solve a problem that you're facing. And then build it out for you.
Yeah.
And then once you've built it out, just basically talk to everyone about how you've solved the problem for yourself, and then say this can solve the problem for you too.
Yeah.
And then just ship it. Don't get like too attached to it. Just ship an MVP, ship what you're using.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, wise words, man. That's what I would also agree with that. And then I'd say too, like keep in mind like the bigger picture and like make sure everything's linking back to yourself. And make sure to like be building an audience there on the side. Because it will just help. Like who knows, like maybe, it doesn't take off this week, but in a couple of months, somebody's gonna need it that's big and then it might blow up. So
Yeah,
like
totally.
you can always like just always have that in mind and continue to build that community around yourself too.
Yeah, that's what's so great, I think, about projects and content and just getting yourself out there is because it's evergreen, right? Like the idea that it's always there, it's always relevant, and yeah, like you said, someone could find it, and it's not like if you build something on GitHub, it's always going to be on GitHub, and there's a chance that someone's going to come across it. It's not like it's just there and then gone. Even like Twitter, Instagram, right? You post something and then it gets lost in a feed and it's kind of gone forever. But like there's less of like an urgency effect with like a GitHub project or your open source project. Like it's always going to be there. People can always find it.
Yes, totally. Heck yeah. Thanks, man. I think
Yeah,
this
this
has
has been
been
great.
solid. Yeah.
Looking forward to talking about more things, and we're
Yes.
planning on having some people on the podcast too. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Hopefully follow along.
please subscribe and
Yep.
follow on the journey.
Yeah. If you want to check out asap.engineering online, we have like a little email sign up. You can sign up for our newsletter. And then we'll be on YouTube, and then Spotify also. So sweet.
Sweet.
Thanks, man. Talk to
All
you
right.
later.
Sounds good. See ya.
See you, bro.